All right, so the following is a public service for Paul Talk. I'm still ruminating on all that he said in this last video, but I really appreciated it and felt the least I could do for the old chunk of coal was read a little bit of Jack Vance. So I got 3 Vance books I borrowed from a friend. Shout out to you if you're listening, friend. I won't dox him. He wouldn't like that. But this is Jack Vance's The Languages of Pow. Get a load of that cover. Looks like some kind of evil Fu Manchu type character trying to take over the world, and we've got a hero in a hood. It looks... I wonder who did that art. Is that Mobius? In his last video, Paul mentioned that he met Mobius, who I was a huge fanboy of in high school. So that was cool. It's always cool when the fanciful becomes real, you know, when that which you only see on a screen or mediated by some media experience becomes real. So I'm thankful to Paul for bringing these titans down to earth a bit, cutting them down to size a little. It's much appreciated. And then it looks like there's some kind of fair maiden, a damsel in distress, a foxy damsel in distress. Copyright 1958. Copyright 1957 by Renown Publications, Inc. I forget, Paul might have said that one of the 3 books I got, I don't think it was this one, he said was a corrupted text. One he had, I don't think it was this one. One he said he had never read, and one he said was sort of like second tier Vance. Wasn't one of his best, but according to Paul, all of Vance, even probably the corrupted stuff, is good. So, chapter 1 is very short. It's just 2 pages. If that goes well, I might read on. But I just thought I deserved to give it a fair shake. Here's another illustration. Almost looks like a Marvel movie or something. Anti-Marvel movie? Who are these people? Anyway, the book is old. 1957 was the year that both of my parents were born, and both of my wife's parents. All 4 of my children's grandparents were born the same year. What are the odds? Although I realized that, never mind. I was going to go off on a tangent, but let me just start reading. This book is threatening to flake in my hands. Sorry, unknown friend of mine. I'm going to try to treat it with care. Here we go. Chapter 1. Well, first let's read the back cover, actually. That's the most important part of a book, according to the Catholic book publisher I met. That's what I've just completed a draft of my book on gambling. The back cover of it, that is. Here's the back cover. In the languages of Pal, Jack Vance is having a good time with a fascinating concept. This is some kind of quote by P. Schuyler Miller, running for Astounding Science Fiction. A good time. He's having a good time with a fascinating concept. The planet Pal, a world of the very far future colonized from Earth, has a stagnant sort of culture and one language. The scientists of the neighboring world of Breakness launch a ruthless experiment, jarring Pal into new virility by installing 3 class languages, one for a warrior class, one for technicians, and one for rulers and bureaucrats. But they build into the formula certain weaknesses of their own degenerate culture. Baran Panasper, heir to the throne of Pal, has been spirited away to Breakness, an odd name for a planet, to Breakness to save his life, and to enable the Breakness wizards to train a tool for the later subjugation of Pal. Heir to the throne of Pal. So Pal is some kind of imperial empire, one planet imperial empire. The heir has been spirited away to Breakness, because I guess he's going to be assassinated or something. And to enable the Breakness wizards to train a tool for the later subjugation of Pau. Oh, because the breakness is taking it over. Okay. This is just all to help me. I'm trying to get into the spirit. Let me see if I can break through the membrane here and get on whatever Vance's wavelength is. I'm giving it the old college try, Paul. Okay. And to enable the Breakness wizards to train a tool for the later subjugation of Pau. But Baron's Pauonian characteristics blend with Breakness science in an unexpected way. A very good yarn. Okay. Baron's I have to read this up twice, I feel like. Baron's Pauonian characteristics. What does that mean? Blend with Breakness science. Anyway, that's just the back cover. In an unexpected way. Okay, it's trying to tease you. Imagine being like a 10-year-old boy, fresh out of the soda jerk shop in the year 1957 or 58, and seeing this through the glass of a shop window. So kind of mental frame. I'll try to. Eisenhower was president. We had recently won the war. All was grand, it seemed to be. Soda pop was in. The Bee Gees were at the top of the charts. What else? And there was a thriving, I take it, science fiction market. Kind of for the first time in America. It's kind of the first real, maybe the height of the sci-fi craze in America. The 50s, very mainstream era for sci-fi. Appealing to a mainstream audience. This would have been, I assume. Unless someone corrects me. Okay, Chapter 1. The Languages of Pau by Jack Vance. Read by yours truly. Christopher Earl Johns. Okay. In the heart of the Polymark cluster, circling the yellow star Oriole, is the planet Pau, with the following characteristics. Mass, 1.37. This is all standard units, by the way. Diameter, 1.39. Surface gravity, 1.04. The plane of Pau's diurnal rotation is the same as its plane of orbit. Hence there are no seasons, and the climate is uniformly mild. Eight continents range the equator at approximately equal intervals. Imand, Shrimand, Vidimand, Minimand, Nonimand, Dronamand, Hivand, and Implant. After the 8 digits of the Pauanese numerative system. Okay. Imand, largest of the continents, has 4 times the area of Nonimand, the least. Only Nonimand, the high southern latitudes, suffers an unpleasant climate. Excuse me, one. An accurate census of Pau has never been made, but the great mass of the population, estimated at 15 billion persons, now that's a lot, it's more than Earth right now, lives in country villages. The Pauanese are a homogeneous people of medium stature, fair-skinned with hair color ranging from tawny brown to brown black, with no great variations of feature or physique. Pauanese history, previous to the reign of Panarch Ailo Panasper, is uneventful. The first settlers, finding the planet hospitable, multiplied to an unprecedented density of population. Their system of life minimized social friction. There were no large wars, no plagues, no disasters, except recurrent famine, which was endured with fortitude. A simple, uncomplicated people were the Pauanese, without religion or cult. They demanded small material rewards from life, but gave a correspondingly large importance to shifts of caste and status. They knew no competitive sports, but enjoyed gathering in enormous clots of 10 or 20 million persons to chant the ancient drones. The typical Pawanese farmed a small acreage, augmenting his income with a home craft or special trade. He showed small interest in politics. His hereditary ruler, the Panarch, exercised an absolute personal rule which reached out through a vast civil service into the most remote village. The word career in Pawanese was synonymous to employment with the civil service, and in general the government was sufficiently efficient. The language of Pau is derived from Way dialect, but molded into peculiar forms. The Pawanese sentence did not so much describe an act as it presented a picture of a situation. There were no verbs, no adjectives, no formal word comparisons such as good, better, best. The typical Pawanese saw himself as a cork on a sea of a million waves, lofted, lowered, thrust aside by incomprehensible forces if he thought of himself as a discrete personality at all. He held his ruler in awe, gave unquestioning obedience, and asked in return only dynastic continuity. For on Pau nothing must vary, nothing must change. But the Panarch, absolute tyrant though he might be, was also forced to conform. Here lay the paradox. The single inner-directed individual of Pau was allowed vices unthinkable and abhorrent to the average man. But he might not appear gay or frivolous. He must hold himself aloof from friendship. He must show himself seldom in public places. Most important of all, he must never seem indecisive or uncertain. To do so would break the archetype. That's the end of the very short first chapter. It's only 2 pages. Although I was trying to give savor and emphasis to each sentence. See how long chapter 2 is. A little bit longer. It's more of a real chapter length. It goes from 7 to 16, 9 pages. I guess I should at least read this next chapter to get more of a taste. I'll probably call it quits like that. I have the bad habit of eating ice, in case you didn't notice. Just remarks, I guess, after reading chapter 1. It reads a little bit like a history textbook. I'm not trying to be negative. I'm just saying that's really how it reads. It reads like an educational volume, as if the reader were a school child, I guess, on, what's the place, Breakness. As if, like an 8th grade reading level, you're an 8th grade student on Breakness. This would be like you're assigned reading in your class about other planets to learn about your neighboring planet Pau. It's curious. It suggests, and this is something I've said about Vance in passing. I don't know how significant it is, but it seems like there's always some kind of allegory going on. And is it obvious? Am I dumb? Am I missing it somehow? Is it that cut and dry? Is the allegory something that has to be teased out in the process of reading the book? Is that part of the fun? That part of the mystery one must sleuth toward? I'm resisting the urge to eat ice. Okay. I don't know what it is. It just feels good on my molars. Okay. So that's just, and like that kind of reading, it requires you to intently pay attention to these details, to fix in your mind's eye all these details as if one would, might have to answer in a pop quiz. Like, let me do a test. How many people live on POW? 15 billion. Check. What are the main features of the Powian language? Let's see if I can remember. No nouns or no verbs or adjectives. Each sentence has it's like more, doesn't really describe an action. What form of government does POW have? Well, it has this supreme monarch. How is he distinguished from others? He can do what he wants, but he has to do it sort of privately or something. Anyway, that's enough commentary on 2 pages. But the beginning of a book is significant, so it deserves some commentary. All right, let me launch into Chapter 2. It's 9 pages. I might or might not stop midway if new ideas occur to me. Okay, Chapter 2. Pergolai, an islet in the Gelians Sea between Minamand and Dronamand, had been preempted and converted into an Arcadian retreat by Panarch Ailo Panasper. At the head of a meadow bordered by Pawanese bamboo and tall myrrh trees stood Ailo's lodge, an airy structure of white glass, carved stone, and polished wood. The plan was simple: a residential tower service wing and an octagonal pavilion with a pink marble dome. I'll just say in passing that I'm really bad at visualizing in my head stuff like this. I think it's just a me thing. But if I were asked to draw that or to picture that in my head after closing my eyes, I have nothing. I've got black in my head. Some kind of marble pavilion. I'm just trying to give a phenomenological account. Here in the pavilion, at a carved ivory table, ivory is good. That's very tangible. Sat Ailo. Ailo really reminds me of this pizza shop named named Ailo's. To his midday repast, wearing the utter black of his position. He was a large man, small-boned, well-fleshed. His silver-gray hair shone fine as a baby's. He had a baby's clear skin and wide, unwinking stare. His mouth drooped, his eyebrows arched high, conveying a perpetual sense of sardonic and skeptical inquiry. I like that description. To the right sat his brother, Bustamont, wearing the title Ayudor, a smaller man with a shock of coarse dark hair, quick black eyes, knobs of muscles in his cheeks. Bustamont was energetic beyond the usual Pawanese norm. He had toured 2 or 3 nearby worlds, returning with a number of alien enthusiasms which had gained him the dislike and distrust of the Pawanese population. Only occurs to me now that Pau might be some kind of allegory for the Orient. Maybe. On Ailo's other side sat his son, Baron Panasper, the medallion. He was a thin child, hesitant and diffident, with fragile features and long black hair resembling Ailo in his clear skin and wide eyes. Across the table sat a score of other men, functionaries of the government, petitioners, 3 commercial representatives from Mercantile, and a hawk-faced man in brown and gray who spoke to no one. Ailo was attended by special maids wearing long gowns striped with black and gold. Each dish served him was first tasted by Bustamont, a custom residual from times when assassination was the rule rather than the exception. Another manifestation of this ancient caution could be found in the three Mamoron standing vigilant behind Ilo. These were enormous creatures tattooed dead black neutraloids. Let me reread that sentence. These were enormous creatures tattooed dead black neutraloids. That's funny. Okay. They wore magnificent turbans of cerise, a word I don't know, and green. I'm guessing sort of aqua something. Tight pantaloons of the same color, chest emblems of white silk and silver, and carried shields of refrax to be locked in front of the panarch in the event of danger. Ilo morosely nibbled his way through the meal, and finally indicated that he was ready to conduct the business of the day. Vilnius Therabon, wearing the ochre and purple of public welfare, arose and came to stand before the panarch. He stated his problem. The cereal farmers of the South Impland savannas were beset by drought. He, Therabon, wished to bring water from across the central Impland watershed, but had been unable to work out a satisfactory arrangement with the Minister of Irrigation. Ilo listened, asked a question or two, then, in a brief sentence, authorized a water purification plant at the Koroi Sharifte Isthmus, with a 10,000-mile pipeline network to take the water where needed. The Minister of Public Health spoke next. The population of Droneman's Central Plain had expanded past available housing. To build new dwellings would encroach upon land assigned to food production, and would hasten the famine already threatening. Ilo, munching a crescent of pickled melon, advised transportation of 1 million persons weekly to Nonaman, the bleak southern continent. Advised transportation of 1 million persons weekly to Nonaman, the bleak southern continent. In addition, all infants arriving to parents with more than 2 children should be subaquated. All infants arriving... Sorry, I'm just trying to make sure I understand every sentence. All infants arriving to parents... It's just an odd way to phrase it. Being born, arriving to parents with more than 2 children should be subaquated. What does subaquate mean? I guess it means killed by drowning. It must be. A euphemism for drowning infants. Okay. These were the classical methods of population control. Would be accepted without resentment. All right, I'm getting into it. All right. Young Baron watched with fascination, awed by the vastness of his father's power. He was seldom allowed to witness state business, for Ilo disliked children. Young Baron watched with fascination, awed by the vastness of his father's power. He was seldom allowed to witness state business, for Ilo disliked children, and showed only small concern for the upbringing of his own son. Recently, the Ayudor Bustemont had interested himself in Baron. Odd serendipity with Baron Trump. Talking for hours on end, until Baron's head grew heavy and his eyes drooped. They played odd games, which bewildered Baron, this is spelled B-E-R-A-N, and left him with a peculiar uneasiness. They played odd games. I think a lot of the appeal of Vance, at least so far in this, has to do with like reading into these understatements. He's, I think Paul's mentioned that before, sort of the classic Vancian understatement. It's riddled with these things that you can glide over, but if you see them for what they're indicating, they're rather humorous. Okay, they played odd games, which bewildered Baron. What does that mean? And left him with a peculiar uneasiness. And of late there had been blank spaces in his mind, lapses of memory. Ooh, this is getting creepy, borderline pedophilic. Is it? It begs the question. at least to modern ears. Okay. As Baron sat now at the ivory table in the pavilion, he held a small, unfamiliar object in his hand. He could not recall where he had found it, but it seemed as if there were something he must do. He looked at his father and felt a sudden hot panic. Bustamante was looking at him, frowning. Baron felt awkward and pulled himself erect in his chair. He must watch and listen, as Bustamante had instructed him. Furtively, he inspected the object he held in his hand. It was at once familiar and strange. As if in recollection from a dream, he knew he had use for his object. And again came the wave of panic. How bizarre. Okay. He tasted a bit of toasted fishtail, but as usual lacked appetite. He felt the brush of eyes. Someone was watching him. Turning his head, he met the gaze of the stranger in brown and gray. The man had an arresting face, long and thin, with a high forehead, a wisp of mustache, a nose like the prow of a ship. His hair was glossy black, thick and short as fur. His eyes were set deep, his gaze dark and magnetic. Awoke all of Baron's uneasiness. The object in his hand felt heavy and hot. He wanted to fling it down, but could not. Just very much a side thing, but I wonder in writing, when rhymes occur like that, do you try to prune them away? Vance let that one ride. It's like almost like a metrical, almost like an Alexandrian couplet. The object in his hand felt heavy and hot. He wanted to fling it down, but could not. The last man to be heard was Sigil Panich, business representative from Mercantile, the planet of a nearby sun. Panich was a thin man, quick and clever, with copper-colored skin and burnished hair, which he wore wound into knobs and fastened with turquoise clasps. He was a typical mercantile, a salesman and trader, as essentially urban as the Peonese were people of soil and sea. As essentially urban as the Peonese were people of soil and sea. I don't understand that. He was a typical mercantile, a salesman and trader, as essentially urban as the Peonese were people of soil and sea. Whatever. Oh, still don't understand what that's saying. Okay. His world sold to the entire cluster. Mercantile space barges roved everywhere, delivering machinery, vehicles, aircraft, communication equipment, tools, weapons, power generators, returning to Mercantile with foodstuffs, luxury handcrafts, and whatever raw material might be cheaper to import than to synthesize. Bustamante whispered to Ailo, who shook his head. Bustamante whispered more urgently. Ailo turned him a slow, caustic side glance. Bustamante sat back sullenly. Sorry, my attention was drifting. Bustamante whispered to Ailo, who shook his head. Bustamante whispered more urgently. Ailo turned him a slow, caustic side glance. Bustamante sat back sullenly. Okay. At a signal from Ailo, the captain of the Mamarone Guard. All these new terms being introduced, like every paragraph. It's a bit exhausting. Not gonna lie. It takes I think it takes a good amount of mental energy to get through Vance. Maybe that's just a thing that happens at the beginning because he's laying the foundations. But all these new words one has to wrap one's mouth around. At a signal from Ailo, the captain of the Mamarone Guard addressed the table in his soft, scraped steel voice. By the Panarch's order, all those who have completed their business will depart. Across the table, only Sigil Panich, his two aides, and the stranger in brown and gray remained. The mercantile moved to a chair opposite Ailo. He bowed, seated himself, his aides coming to stand at his back. Panarch Ailo spoke an offhand greeting. The mercantile responded in broken Pawanese. Aiello toyed with a bowl of brandied fruit, appraising the mercantile. Pow and mercantile have traded for many centuries. Sigil Panich. The mercantile bowed. We fulfill the exact letter of our contracts. This is our creed. Aiello laughed shortly. Trade with Pow has enriched you. We trade with 28 worlds supremacy. Aiello leaned in his chair. There are two matters I wish to discuss with you. You have just heard our need for water on Implant. Implant. We require an installation to demineralize an appropriate quantity of ocean water. You may refer this matter to your engineers. I am at your orders, sir. I don't know if the English accent is appropriate, but why not? Aiello spoke in a level, emotionless voice, almost casual. We have ordered from you, and you have delivered large quantities of military equipment. Sigil Panish bowed agreement. With no outward sign or change, he suddenly seemed uneasy. We fulfilled the exact requirements of your order. I cannot agree with you, Aiello responded. Sigil Panish became stiff. His words were even more formal than before. Sorry, I'm trying to figure out. My neighbor is arriving. I have a friend coming over soon. The equipment was exactly as described in your invoice. Aiello went on in his coldest tones. You delivered 64 barge monitors. There's a footnote here. Pawanese number system is based on the number 8. Hence, a Pawanese 100 is 64, 1000 is 512, etc. All this math, man. New words, mathematical terms, grammatical. I don't want to poo-poo any of it because I think it... Probably the substance to getting Vance is to appreciate those... appreciate all this somehow. Okay. A large number of multiple resonators, energetics, wasps, and hand weapons. These accord with the original order. Exactly, sir. However, you knew the purpose behind this order. Sigil Panish bowed his copper-bright head. You refer to conditions on the planet Batmarsh. Batmarsh. It's odd that they are like going to all these worlds, but they still use hand weapons. Really an unexplained detail and a lot of science fiction from this era, I take it. The same thing happened in the Dune universe, I recall. Except in Dune, there was given some kind of rationale because defensive force fields had been developed that only allowed objects to pass through at a slow enough speed. Anyway. However, you knew the purpose behind this order. Sigil Panish bowed his copper-bright head. You refer to conditions on the planet Batmarsh. Just so. The Dolberg dynasty has been eliminated. Neighbor's taking forever to park. This is bothering me for some reason. The Dolberg dynasty has been eliminated. A new dynasty, the Brumbos, have assumed power. New batch rulers customarily undertake military ventures. Such is the tradition, agreed the mercantile. You have supplied these adventures with armament? Sigil Panish once again agreed. We sell to any who will buy. You have done so for many years. You must not reproach us for this. Aiello raised his eyebrows. I do not do so. I reproach you for selling us standard models while offering the Brumbo clan. The Brumbo clan. Like a clown clan? Sorry, nitpicking. While offering the Brumbo clan equipment against which you guarantee we will be powerless. Sigil Panish blinked. What is the source of your information? Must I divest myself of every secret? No, no, exclaimed Panish. Your allegations, however, seem mistaken. Our policy is absolute neutrality. Unless you can profit by double dealing. Sigil Panish drew himself erect. Supremacy, I am official representative of Mercantile on Pau. Your statements to me, therefore, must be regarded as formal insults. I just realized it's odd that there's this description about how their language doesn't have any verbs or adjectives, but they're talking in perfect King's English. So how does that make any sense? I guess the quick answer is it doesn't. Or maybe they speak some kind of ruler language that the rest of the planet does not, but it's unexplained. Hey, Rich.
What?
Good afternoon.
Yeah, it is.
What time zone are you in?
Pacific.
Oh, hey, how's it going, Dave?
Pacific.
Let me pause this
Pacific
video.
Northwest.
All right, so sorry for the break. I wish I'd been able to do it in one go, but hey, beggars can't be choosers. So I'm drinking, don't worry, it's evening this time. And it's a local beer since 1986. I always think it's funny when companies have that insignia on a relatively recent year. I saw one that was estimated 2004. Estimated. Maybe it means something else when it says EST, other than estimated or English or Eastern Standard Time. Anyway, this is the label. So I'll give a little bit of a glare there, but it looks like some kind of German town or something. Bonus points to anyone who can say what town that is. Oh wait, maybe it's Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh, PA. It is local, I just said. Micro Brewery. Penn Brewery. Oh, I know where it's from. Church Brew Works. There's this church that was converted into a brewery in Pittsburgh. It's not the worst possible use of an old church building. It's a church in Wilkinsburg, the neighboring sort of evil twin of Pittsburgh. It's covered in blight now. It's kind of a ghetto, but it's a church that one of the clients of my boss bought over there that used to be used for underground fights. Several murders took place at this old Catholic church. Wages of sin. Anyway, let's try to get back into the groove here and finish this chapter. There's this guy Sigil Panish. He's the last of these ministers or whoever who are talking to the Tsar or Emperor or whoever he is. Does it say here on the back? I don't think so. Anyway, the supreme ruler of Pau. Why Pau? I think it bothers me about like invented names is they don't make sense to me. Maybe they do make some kind of sense and I'm just not getting it. But why Pau and not Bop? You know what I mean? Why Pau and not Zap or Zoom or I guess those aren't good because they are more things that are already taken. Anyway, let me truncate this tangent. Let me nip this tangent in the bud. And begin again. Where I left off, I was becoming a little distracted because my neighbor, so how about I backtrack just a little bit. Ilo, and the name of the emperor is Ilo? Same name as a pizzeria in Pittsburgh. Alo raised his eyebrows. I do not do so. Okay. No, you're watching the video, so you don't need me to backtrack. I'll just try to catch up. Let's see here. I ended with, your statements to me, therefore, must be regarded as formal insults. Okay. Alo appeared to be faintly surprised. Insult a mercantile? Preposterous. Sigil Panish's skin burnt vermilion. Oh, because the emperor is alleging, that's right, that this guy has been double dealing in some way. He's been using imperial funds to make money on the side or something. Oh, his skin burnt vermilion. Because of this comment, insult a mercantile? Preposterous. He's insulting the fact that he's a mercantile. I guess the dig being that mercantiles are so low that they can't even be insulted. Damn. Okay. Bustamante whispered in Ilo's ear. Ilo shrugged, turned back to the mercantile. His voice was cool, his words carefully measured. For the reasons I have stated, I declare that the mercantile contract has not been fulfilled. The merchandise will not perform its function. We will not pay. Sigil Paniche affirmed. The delivered articles meet the contractual specifications. By his lights, nothing more need be said. But they are useless to our need, a fact known on Mercantile. Oh wait, Mercantile is a planet? Sigil Paniche's eyes gleamed. No doubt your supremacy has considered the long-range effects of such a decision. Bustamante could not restrain a retort. Better had the mercantile considered the long-range effects of double dealing. Ilo made a small gesture of annoyance, and Bustamante sat back. Sigil Paniche looked over his shoulder to his two subordinates. They exchanged emphatic whispers. Then Paniche asked, "May I inquire as to what long-range effects the Ayudor alluded?" Ilo nodded. "I direct your attention to the gentleman at your left hand." All eyes swung to the stranger in brown and gray. "Who is this man?" Sigil Paniche asked sharply. "I do not recognize his clothes." Ilo was served a bowl of green syrup by one of the black and gold-clad maidens. Bustamante dutifully sampled a spoonful. Ilo drew the bowl close to him, sipped. "This is Lord Palafox. He is here to offer us advice." He sipped once more from the bowl, pushed it aside. The maiden quickly removed it. Sigil Paniche surveyed the stranger with cold hostility. His aides muttered to each other. Bustamante sat slumped into his seat. "After all," said Alo, "if we cannot rely upon Mercantile for protection, we must seek elsewhere." Sigil Paniche once more turned to whisper with his counselors. There was a hushed argument. Paniche snapped his fingers in emphasis. The counselors bowed and became silent. Paniche turned back to Alo. "Your supremacy naturally will act as he thinks best. I must point out that the products of Mercantile are surpassed nowhere." Ilo glanced at the man in brown and gray. "I am not disposed to dispute this point. Lord Palafox might have something to say." Palafox, however, shook his head. Paniche motioned to one of his subordinates, who advanced reluctantly. "Allow me to display one of our new developments." The counselor handed him a case, from which Paniche drew a pair of small transparent hemispheres. The neutraloid bodyguards, at the sight of the case, had leapt in front of Alo with their refrax shields. Sigil Paniche grimaced painfully. "No need for alarm, there is no danger here." He displayed the hemispheres to Alo, then placed them over his eyes. "Our new optidines. They function either as microscope or telescope. The enormous range of their power is controlled by the ocular muscles and the eyelids. Truly marvelous. For instance," he turned, looked out the window of the pavilion. "I see quartz crystals in the stones of the seawall. A gray chit stands under that far fonella bush." He turned his gaze to his sleeve. "I see the threads, the fibers of the threads, the laminae of the fibers." It just occurred to me while reading, sorry to interrupt, I just don't want to forget it, so I want to say it, that there's an interesting, it occurs to me that there's a pretty good apology, in the sense of apologetics, that one can make for science fiction as a whole, and maybe Jack Vance in particular, if it turns out that way. And that science fiction offers a view of how technology, in a more advanced state, I'm talking now not just about like fictional forms of technology that have not been invented, but even forms of technology that have been invented. A view of how that technology could actually function in an advanced state. The idea being basically like take the technology we already have, and what if we could wipe the slate clean and use it in its appropriate context, you know? The idea being, I guess, just that technology is not an absolute evil, only a relative one, because we use it poorly. And like, you know, like a child who's been introduced to power tools, it's beyond our power to use appropriately, use effectively, use ethically. Anyway, so there appears to me there's an interesting line of argumentation we could develop with respect to that. My mind is kind of in article mode right now because during the intermission I talked to this guy who's a writer, and we talked all about my book idea and his book idea, and I was really pressing him, and also talking about Madeline's article. Someone in the Paul Talk Discord channel, Madeline, wrote a first draft of an essay about abortion, and we've become co-conspirators, co-authors potentially of a future peace. So the whole notion of how to develop an idea, how to nurture an idea through to some kind of consummation, of some kind of fruition of being more than just the run-of-the-mill idea, but actually how to properly tend, how to garden, anyway. Maybe I'll circle back to that after I'm done reading here and try to develop some kind of commentary that might be of interest to Paul Talk or anybody else. Okay, so he's putting these crystals, these stones, to his eyes that can be either microscopes or telescopes. Reminds me of an aphorism by Kierkegaard, who said that at times he feels like he's wearing a pair of goggles where one eye is a microscope and the other is a telescope. I feel a little like that now. So he's looking at these laminae, the laminae of the fibers. There's Jack Vance's stupendously immense vocabulary coming into play. Paul Talk said in his last video that, you know, that Jack Vance, that they did an analysis and kind of word count or categorization, and found that Jack Vance used more words than everybody in the English language except for, who was it, Dr. Johnson, or who was it? Doesn't matter. But I think that must be true, because I've only read a chapter and a half, and I've already come across several words that I don't know, and I have a pretty good vocabulary, I think. He looked at Bustamante. I note the pores of the Ayudor's estimable nose. I observed several hairs in his nostril. He glanced at the medallion, carefully avoiding the solecism of staring at Ailo. The brave lad is excited. I count his pulse. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 11, 12, 13. He holds a tiny object between his fingers, no larger than a pill. He turned, inspected the man in gray. I see, he stared. Then, with a sudden gesture, removed the optidines from his eyes. I'm not even sure if optidine is that a word created by Jack Vance, or is it some word I don't know? I think he created it. I think so. It's that root, dine. Optodine, opta-I. Okay, anyway. He inspected the man in gray. Why is he counting? The brave lad is excited. He's counting. He can count his pulse. Huh. Interesting. Reminds me of Milton Erickson. Milton Erickson could have, the mysterious and folklorish figure of psychotherapy, the psychiatrist Milton Erickson. The hypnotist. He's a hypnotist who one time worked for the CIA. He could see people's pulse with the naked eye. Anyway, what did you see? Bustamante inquired. Sigil Paniche studied the tall man in perturbation and awe. I saw his sign, that tattoo of a breakness wizard. The words seemed to arouse Bustamante. He glared in accusation at Alo, gave Palafox a look of loathing, then glowered down at the carved ivory of the table. You are correct, said Alo. This is Lord Palafox, Domine of Breakness Institute. Domini. It sounds like a religious title or something. Sigil Paniche bowed his head frigidly. Will your supremacy allow me a question? Ask what you will. What does Lord Palafox do here on Powell? Ilo said blandly. He came at my behest. I need expert advice. Certain of my confidants, he glanced rather contemptuously toward Bustamante, feel that we can buy mercantile cooperation. He believes that for a price you will betray the Brumbos of Batmarsh. It's hard for me to read stuff like that with a straight face. Brumbos of Batmarsh in the same way you have already betrayed us. Sigil Paniche said in a brittle voice, we deal in all types of merchandise. We can be engaged for special research. Ilo twisted his pink mouth into a sneer of repugnance. I would rather deal with Lord Palafox. Why are you telling me this? I would not have your syndics think that their treachery goes unnoticed. It seems to me Jack Vance is touching on a very interesting political dynamic here. Namely that for anyone who rules, authority brings with it, that kind of authority brings with it, especially in the tyrannically minded, a lack of trust, a distrustfulness towards one's own lackeys, and therefore a need to go outside one's own sphere of rule, of power, to find someone who can deliver help, deliver one would hope, unbiased advice. I think that's a big theme in like Yakuza movies, lobster movies. Organized crime being a kind of synecdoche of state governance. Okay, where were we? I would not have your syndics think that their treachery goes unnoticed. Sigil Paniche made a great effort. I urge you to reconsider. In no way have we cheated you. We delivered exactly what was ordered. Mercantile has served you well in the past. We hope to serve you in the future. If you deal with breakness, think what the bargain entails. I have made no bargains with Lord Palafox, said Ilo, with a swift glance toward the man in brown and gray. Ah, but you will, and if I may speak openly. He waited. Speak, said Ilo. Or probably said more like speak, said Ilo. To your eventual dismay. I may speak openly, that is, to your eventual dismay. Nice phrase. He became emboldened. Never forget supremacy, that they build no weapons on Breakness. They make no application of their science. He looked to Palafax. Is this not true? Not altogether, replied Palafax. A dominie of the Institute is never without his weapons. And Breakness manufactures weapons for export? Panache persisted. No, answered Palafax with a slight smile. It is well known that we manufacture only knowledge and men. Sigil Paniche turned to Alo. Only weapons can guard you against the fury of the Brumbos. Why not examine, at least, some of our new products? This can do no harm, Bustamante urged, and perhaps we will not require Palafax after all. Ilo turned him a peevish glance, but Sigil Paniche already was displaying a globe-shaped projector with a hand grip. This is one of our most ingenious developments. The Medallion Baron, watching an absorption, felt a sudden quiver, a pang of indescribable alarm. Why? How? What? He must have the pavilion. He must go. But he could not move from his seat. He must leave the pavilion. He must go, but he could not leave from his seat. This is the son of the ruler? What is he called? The Medallion. The Medallion Baron. Watching an absorption. Felt a sudden quiver, a pang of indescribable alarm. Yeah, I guess he's been there the whole time. This sort of mysterious tension has been building in him. Why? How? What? He must leave the pavilion. He must go. Okay, because of this globe-shaped projector. Paniche was directing his tool toward the pink marble dome. Observe, if you will, the top half of the room went black, as if concealed in a black shutter, as if snatched from existence. The device seeks out, attracts, and absorbs energy of the visual phase, explained the mercantile. It is invaluable for the confusion of an adversary. Baron turned his head, looked helplessly toward Bustamante. Now notice, cried Sigil Paniche. I turn this knob here. He turned the knob. The room was blotted out entirely. Bustamante's cough was the only sound to be heard. Then there was a hiss of surprise, a rustle of movement, a choking sound. Light returned to the pavilion. A great horrified gasp sounded. All eyes went to the Panarch. He lay back into his pink silk divan. His leg jerked up, kicked, set dishes and flagons on the table rattling. Help, doctor! Sorry. Help, doctor, cried Bustamante. To the Panarch. To the Panarch. Ilo's fist beat a spasmodic tattoo on the tabletop. His eyes went dim. His head fell forward in the complete lassitude of death. Nice. Very nice. Okay. So, Jacques Vance. What to say? I'm glad I got that thought out earlier because I don't think I'd be able to recall it now. You know, I guess I've made my feelings fairly clear already, I guess, throughout the reading of that. Constantly interjecting, into the story. Probably not the ideal reading. Ideally, one would be completely absorbed in his own. But I found that that reading out loud is this wonderful thing, almost a necessary thing for reading, I think. And I don't want to descend down the wormhole of psychological this and that, but Well, let me first say that I was talking to a friend on the phone earlier. First, this guy came over, this writer, we were talking. And then, right after he left, right on cue, my friend, this Dominican priest, called me. We talked for an hour. And he said a phrase that I felt like stealing. I guess it was said by Tolkien in reference to Shakespeare. Tolkien said of Shakespeare that he had a cordial dislike of him. And just that phrase, having a cordial dislike. Interesting. I didn't know that Tolkien felt that way about Shakespeare. I wonder what you could unpack there. Shakespeare and Tolkien being both popular authors, but perhaps at opposite ends of a kind of pole, two poles, opposite ends of a kind of spectrum, perhaps. And then what? If that was given as an essay prompt on the SATs or GREs, not that they give prompts of that kind, what would I say, though? Well, that Tolkien, above all else, was a world builder, and I don't wish to reduce Vance to Tolkien's stature, because let's say that Vance is high superior, much higher. But Vance and Tolkien both share the fact that they are world builders, whereas Shakespeare is the opposite of that. I mean, I remember hearing, I don't know how literally accurate this is, but I remember hearing that Shakespeare never actually wrote an original story. He took stories that were already well known, that had worked their way into the popular imagination, and then he gave them his inimitable treatment. But he never constructed a world, ever. You know, Hamlet is sort of this revenge story. It's sort of just kind of like just a more souped up version of a classic revenge tale. And all of Shakespeare's historical epics are based on real historical events that took place in England and elsewhere. Even the more romantic pieces like Romeo and Juliet have some kind of basis in reality that he then guessied up. So in that respect, it makes total sense that Tolkien would have a cordial dislike of Shakespeare. And I think in a similar way, I might describe myself as having a cordial dislike of Jack Vance. For all the reasons that seeped out while I was reading it. You know, well, I don't need to list everything again. I mean, anyone who's watched this video to this point has heard my blow by blow reaction. So, but to sum up, maybe, or to land the plane, as my Dominican friend said, that's the primary object in when you're when you're giving a homily at church. It's important to land the plane. It's some kind of parlance. It's often used, apparently. Well, I guess first to remember that on the video Paul made before the last one, I had suggested in the comments that Shakespeare offered some kind of synthesis between what I had framed as the more discovery-based artistes versus the more plot-driven one. And given what I just said about Tolkien and Shakespeare, I'm not sure that that's at all the case. And that rather a more poignant, more not poignant, but more more important, more manifest dichotomy would be between those stories which erect a world. Like, Tolkien invented all these languages, and this book is called The Language of Powers. There's sort of all this emphasis placed on describing the mass of the planet, the way people talk, that. Like, it takes you several chapters just to get your bearings in what kind of world you are. You know what I mean? Versus stories that take the subject matter that are even extremely familiar and give them shape. That seems like a divide that has less to do with the sort of the unconscious creative processes and just more to do with the content of what is being written, right? Maybe that's the fundamental thing. And then sort of the stylistic considerations and whatever the process an individual author goes through to write a thing rides on top of that. I mean, I don't want to say I'm never going to read Vance because I was getting engaged, and maybe I'll pick it up again, but it's not really my top priority, and I mean, maybe I'll get into it later. I don't know. I'll withhold judgment. I'll withhold ultimate judgment on that fact. I think I just like reading out loud. Kind of regardless of what it is, as long as it's decent, of decent quality. It's nice. It's like playing the piano with your mouth. Which sounds really gross if you take it literally. Anyway. I don't know that I have that much more to say that is pertinent to the subject of Jack Vance. But I have more to say about other stuff, but if I kept on talking and got into all that right now, this video would be 3 hours long, so how about I stop and begin again later after I've done a bit of work. Okay.